So last but not least, we've got Christina. She's going to talk to us about their e-portfolio. She's got years of experience. So she's going to impart her wisdom. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you all for staying. Anybody who knows me well will find this quite ironic that I'm giving this talk, but when you start subspecialty training, you do feel like you're a bit lost and what on earth have I signed up for? And you will have your head in the hands for quite some time. So what is the point of the e-portfolio and why do we have to do it? So at the beginning of your subspecialty training, you're really keen. By the end of it, probably not so keen and you're probably quite burnt out. Eventually, we might get there. So this talk is for the real keenies, the ones who are about to quit and run away. But at some point, we might actually have to have our own trainees. So hopefully this will be relevant for those starting subspecialty training, but also for those who are thinking about, well, like me, reflecting on how I could have done it better and how I would have approached it had I have to go through this all again. So hopefully we'll be competent consultants who are actually a lot more confident, and we've got trainees that we're going to support through this. So why am I giving this talk? Well, I could tell you how to suck eggs, but that's not really my way. So in the most recent TEF survey, I looked at when are people doing the e-portfolio, okay? The purpose of the e-portfolio is just to confirm to the GMC that we can do our job, okay? And the vast majority of us, over 95% of us, are spending time when we should be spending time with our families, time when we should be sleeping, doing e-portfolio. And that isn't the purpose of the e-portfolio, I would contend. And a lot of us are burnt out, as are our consultants. So there is no point making our consultants more burnt out by giving them more work to do. And equally, there's no point doing the same to ourselves. So we've got to try and be smart. These are some of the feedback that we got on the TEF survey with regards to training I think it was just generally in subspecialty training. And this is pointless, and I would contend it is not the purpose of the e-portfolio to kill us more. And, you know, there are people who are saying, can I just take a 6-month break from it and concentrate on doing my job? You know, I think we've lost the point somewhere. It's not making us better clinicians, but it's not really the fault of the e-portfolio. So what is the point of the e-portfolio? Well, it's just to measure, can we do our job? And we just have to evidence it. We don't need to drown ourselves nor our supervisors in paperwork. It is somewhat of a tick box exercise, but you've got to do it properly and not feel like you're completely lost in it. So what I would suggest, and I did do this actually, get your geek on. At the beginning of your subspecialty training, actually read your curriculum. I made the mistake during my early training, I didn't read the Labour Ward ATSM when I signed up for it, because I was told I had to do it. If I'd read it, I would never have agreed to do it, because it was just core training. So I guess I didn't have to have that fight. Read all of the documentation. There's 3 main documents you need to read. You need to read the definitive curriculum guide, whichever one you happen to be sitting on. If you've just started, it'll be the 2024 one. There is a definitive document on the curriculum. So you've got the curriculum guide, you've got the definitive curriculum, and then you've got a matrix. So you just need to figure out what you've signed up for. At some point, you should be doing monthly meetings. I don't know how many of the subset trainees actually do that with the supervisors, but that is recommended but not mandated. And at the beginning, maybe have a think about what sort of consultant you want to be. If you're doing a 2-year program, it's not very long. So actually, if you start your training in a 2-year program and you want to do the Basingstoke, you need to be applying like yesterday. Because it comes out in like an 18-month cycle, and you might have missed the boat if you try and do it at the end of your training. So do you want to do a Basingstoke rotation? Do you want to go abroad for a time? So maybe you want to apply to the BGCS fellowship. Do you want to continue your academics during your training? So figure out which type of the curriculum you're on, the core curriculum. And for some of us, you might remember this. I think I'm one of the very few that are doing it. So read the correct curriculum document, read the curriculum guide. They're all on the RCOG website. These are the sort of documents that you're going to be looking for. And then there's this. I haven't gone through it because I think it'll stress me out. But it's basically looking at what you need to do for your obstetrics. And make sure you're looking at the correct matrix, because there are currently ones for people on 3 years program, 2-year programs, 2019 core curriculum. It will all simplify, and I think all the changes that are made are for the better. but it is quite confusing at the moment. So it's a tick box exercise. How are we going to achieve it and not burn ourselves out? I think there is a role for paper. Having a diary or something that you carry around with you, you can go through all the curriculum, take notes, read the footnotes, because that's where they hide the details that they like to catch you out at your sub-spec reviews. Really get geeky with it. I'm sorry, like I did this, and I'm not the world's most organised person, but I had a checklist of everything I had to do in every year, taken out of the core curriculum, so I knew what I was going to do. Do it when you're still keen and you're just starting, so you can get through it all. I'd say get your BSCCP done, ideally before, or you could end up delaying your training for it. Manage your supervisor. So when I'm doing my MD, I wish I had done the course, but the university that I did my MD with offered a managing your supervisor course. Now, many of our supervisors throughout our training haven't got a clue how to run the e-portfolio, and you end up having to do it, or they don't really know what we have to get done. So it really is our, one of the benefits of doing an MD or a PhD that you realise actually you're an adult, you have to run your own training, you have to manage your own research or whatever. And it's the same with subspecialty training. Nobody's going to go, Christina, have you done your OSATs? Have you done your mini KEXs and all those sort of things? So I think if I went and did it again, I'd probably just book in all the things and give myself deadlines so that they were done at a reasonable stage across the way. If at any point that you're not getting things, you can't be passive about it. If you're not achieving your radical hysterectomies because nobody does them anymore, you can't just go, oh, well, I'm not doing it because I'm not getting them anymore. You've got to raise it and you've got to go somewhere else to get it done, because otherwise you will be failed. So you need to raise concern. Ideally, you need to be documenting these meetings so that if there are shortcomings within your training program, you can seek help early rather than go, oh, well, nobody ever told me that I had to do that. Learning's not linear. You might feel like you're not getting anywhere, and then eventually it sort of all clicks, and then it works. And get your other sub-specs to help you out. Alison and I spend pretty much every day on the telephone, and it's probably the one thing that gets us through sub-spec, because we're going to be consultant colleagues eventually together, and I think it's really important to build those networks now. So figure out who's got the power and figure out who the assessors are who are going to be testing us. So our assessors at the sub-spec reviews are our bosses, our colleagues, the CDs, the TPDs. They're really busy. And then they're being asked to go through our e-portfolios. So just put yourself into their shoes and decide what do they want. You want to make it really easy for them. We already know, from Hannah's presentation that they're really busy, they're burnt out, and they're really pressured, and then they have to deal with quite an onerous task of making sure that we're not completely incompetent. So make it easy for them. A good friend of mine, also called Alison, but not Alison Montgomery, suggested putting capitals whenever you do your mini KEXs as your OSAT. So I don't actually know whether we have to do this anymore, but you used to have to, again, it was in the footnotes, have 2 Breaking Bad News and 1 fertility mini KEX and CBDs out of the 8 that you have to do. Now, you don't have a certain number that you have to do, which makes it a little bit more difficult to judge, but make it easy for people so that they can see that you're filling in the right things. If you've done a leadership course, label it leadership, and then they don't have an excuse to tell you that you haven't done it. Cross-reference everything a gazillion times if it's relevant, because that helps you fill up your portfolio. Be smart. Don't swamp them. If you do a gazillion reflections that say, I saw this, it was interesting, I will do X, Y, and Z, it shows no reflection. It doesn't show that you've really cared, and nobody can actually find what they want. So I'd say if you're going to go to the trouble of doing a CBD or a mini KEX or a reflection, do less, but do them properly. So make sure that when they click on something in your e-portfolio, they read it and go, well, actually, they thought about it. So I would argue that fewer, well-written, well-thought-out mini KEXs CBDs will be much better than an e-portfolio brimming with information, but doesn't show much reflection or learning. I got caught out on this one because maybe I'm a bit like, read it and follow it what it says. But on the educational supervisor's report, it says, link other evidence since last ARCP. So I linked other evidence since my last ARCP. And then I got an outcome 5 because they said that I hadn't done a leadership course. I'd done 2 leadership courses, of which one took a year and the other took 6 months. So I wasn't best pleased when I got that outcome. And they did change it. But the reason was I hadn't linked my leadership course because I'd done it like a year or 2 years previously. So really make it easy. If you've got things on your matrix that you have to achieve, I would say link them in that part. Be very thankful that you're not doing this curriculum anymore. There's 17 SIPs. I think there are now only 7. So work-based assessments. Fortunately, your CBDs and mini-KEXs now all have the same headings. So now, if I was in my position 3 years ago, my little diary would have these headings in it, and maybe once a week I might just jot something down so I could do them eventually. Maybe, life goals. But as I say about writing things down, a lot of people are and I'm quite techie and geeky, but if I type something into my phone or I take a screenshot, I never, ever, ever look at it again, even with the best will of intentions. And there is actually a well-known motto, apparently, that spoken words fly away, but written words remain. I think that act of physically putting pen to paper, it gives you the option to go back and reflect on things. There was an absolutely excellent talk this year in Madrid at the robotics conference by a gentleman called Javier Magrina, and actually somebody else linked some of his research. He gave a talk really just about how he learned to operate and how he became sort of the mentor he is. He's a big robotic surgeon, but he's done lots of surgery. And one of the things he talked about doing was writing things down in full, like writing out operation notes and reflecting on every bit that he found technically difficult and reviewing it. But I think if we spend all our time trying to be very, very good students and putting so much into our e-portfolio, I think we just get burnt out and don't actually learn to do the job or reflect on what we're doing. So I think there is a role for writing things down and maybe trying to reflect and survive subspecialty training. So this is just some descriptions of what a CBD is, what a mini KEX is. We also have to do at least 1 NOTS a year, I believe, still. But essentially, they boil down to the same headings, or similar headings. I basically just asked ChatGPT, can you give me some sentence openers? Anybody who's got kids who are doing English, or there will be things like they use descriptive words and all these sort of things. And nobody gives us any training on reflective practice or how to do work-based assessments, etc. And I thought some of these were quite good. And it might help a little bit of the mental block of how do I start this or what do I need to do. So you've got trainees analysis. So I considered the options, or I found this quite difficult, or, I reviewed X, Y, and Z, or I spoke to X, Y, and Z. What can you use for your learning plan? Good options are BGCS, ESGO, IGCS, e-learning, or webinars that you can look. There's also on Spotify, you've got all the podcasts that you can listen to. Additional actions, I find it a bit difficult. I feel like these are sort of the same, but I'll involve the MDT, I will communicate better. Think it's the soft skills that they want you to evidence. And you need to show that you've reflected. You can't say, I saw this happened, and I haven't really learned anything from it. Just a quick post on this. I think this causes a bit of confusion. In your matrix, you have to reach certain criteria at certain levels. So in your year 1, if you're on a 2-year program, in your year 1, you need to have completed your SIPs 1, 2, 5, 11, 12, 14, and 17. It seems quite a big ask, and that means that you've achieved them to level 5, but then also overall your entrustability level needs to be 43 out of 85, so the rest of them then need to add up to 43. And then you need to have got it all done by the end of the 2nd year. So it's not really surprising that a lot of people on the 2-year program are needing a bit of extra time. Good news is, although I think there's something like 59 OSATs in the old gynae oncology curriculum, there's only, I think, 14 of them, I haven't added them up recently, that you actually have to get 3 competent OSATs at. So focus on them. This is a little clip from the Educational Supervisors Report. This is a bit like the old library that we had on the old e-portfolio. It's sort of your only opportunity to provide some sort of organisation to your e-log or your e-portfolio. So this is where you need to start linking things. And further down that page or on one of it is where you have to link your other evidence. So make sure you put everything in. So this needs to change. We need to stop doing this. You know, I know within the subspecialty training committee, within the committee that Hannah's on, trainees committee, we are looking at trying to improve the amount of training, well, time that people have to do their e-portfolio so that they're not doing it in their own time. Try and do it with your supervisor. So if you're going to do this, I'm very poor at it, so I'm being a bit of a hypocrite, but if you're going to do it well and do it properly rather than just do a load of rubbish. Don't get lost. And I quite like this analogy is, you know, if you imagine that you feel like you're literally paddling all the time, you know, to stay afloat, and everybody else seems to be, you know, quite happily cruising along, everything's easy for them, you've got to remember that under the water they're still paddling like crazy to keep up, you know. So they're all the same as you, and eventually you will get through it. Thank you.